Early one morning, Rosie brought the workers into the clay pits as usual. However, the engines were a little surprised to see that Sir Topham Hatt was also on board. He strode forward and turned to address the engines. "Good morning," said the Fat Controller. "I have some very important news for you all. Sir Robert Normanby, the Earl of Sodor, has just announced plans to finance the complete renovation of Brendam Docks. As such, most of Brendam Harbor is going to be closed off for some time. Therefore, all shipments of China clay from now until the time the renovations are complete must be shipped through Knapford Harbor." "Sir," said Timothy, "if I may, why is the Earl beginning such an ambitious project right as winter is beginning? Won't the weather inhibit his progress? Not to mention the Sodor construction team is already tied up with rebuilding Tidmouth Tower," said Bill. "Why is the Earl even financing such a project?" said Marion. "Pure generosity seems to me an unlikely explanation." "All of these concerns are indeed valid," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Ones I myself expressed when Sir Robert Normanby first proposed this idea. He's playing his cards very close to his chest, I'm afraid. All he told me was that this was part of a much larger plan, but that all would be revealed in good time." Said Timothy. "How curious." "Have you met the Earl?" said Bill. "Yeah," said Ben. "Curious isn't exactly the word I would use to describe him." "I believe eccentric is his preferred term," said the Fat Controller. "But my order stands. The China clay must be shipped through Knapford Harbor for the time being. Now, I must depart. Good day to you all." As soon as Sir Topham Hatt had boarded the train, Rosie puffed away. "I do wonder what's really going on here," said Marion. "I don't like being left in the dark like this," said Timothy. "I get enough of that from Bill and Ben." "Oh, come on," said Bill. "You're not still going on about that prank, are you?" "Geez," said Ben. "Trap a guy in a tunnel just once and you're marked for life, I suppose. I see how it is, Timothy." "All right, that's enough," said Boko. "We've no time for bickering and speculation," said Boko. "We've still got a job to do. And if that job has changed slightly for the time being, then so be it." "Agreed," said Marion. "Let's get to work, everyone. Chop chop." "Right," said Boko. "Bill, Ben, you take the first load of China clay to the docks. I want you both there to learn how to navigate the harbor. It can be a bit confusing if you've never been there before." The twins whistled and then set off. Knapford Harbor was busier than ever. Because of the Earl's project, many trains that would have normally gone through Brendam were forced into Knapford Harbor. The engines of the Great Western Branch Line were kept on the edge of their wheels constantly, working harder than they ever had before. Ships laden with cargoes from far and wide waited impatiently for access to the port. Presently, Duck was having a short rest and chatting with Murdoch at the platform. "I simply don't understand what the Earl is trying to accomplish with all of this," said Murdoch. "So far his plans seem to be doing more harm than good. Just look at these docks. An excess of ships waiting in the harbor, cargo piling up by the quayside. This whole place looks like it's going to explode." "I agree," said Duck. "We're all rushed off our wheels, and day one is just beginning. Can you imagine how it's going to be during the holiday season?" "On the whole, I trust the Earl," said Murdoch. "But they say this is only part of a much larger plan, which means this whole thing is going to be, well, ambitious, even for the Earl. If the Earl didn't for 1 minute stop to think about the consequences renovating Brendam at a time like this would have, then I shudder to think what the ramifications of the rest of his plans will be." Just then a pair of high-pitched whistles sounded in the distance. "Oh, good Lord," said Murdoch. "Please tell me it's not those devilish tank engine twins." Unfortunately for Murdoch, it was. The twins stopped just outside the station. They saw a chance for a joke. "Ben," exclaimed Bill, "what is that huge useless lump of scrap iron on the other line?" "Why, it's Murdoch, don't you know? It looks like Murdoch. It's got his big ugly shape. But Murdoch never takes trains to Knapford. He always goes to Brendam. That's enough, you two, said Duck, but the twins weren't listening. Perhaps, said Ben, if it's scrap iron, we should just take it to the scrap yards. Don't be silly, Ben, said Bill. This lot's useless for scrap. We'll just have to push it out on the quay and dump it into the ocean. Hawkeye, what nonsense is this? You wouldn't be making fun of Murdoch now, would you? Asked Donald. No. Of course not, said Bill. Oh, said Douglas, pulling up from behind. You weren't, were you? That's good. Because if you were, I wouldn't hesitate to knock off both your side rods and stick 'em up in places you didn't know you had. Right, stammered Ben. Now listen here, said Donald. Don't think we both haven't been warned about your antics. We don't take kindly to jokes like yours, said Douglas. As long as you're in our harbor, you'll do as we say. That goes for the both of you. Understood? Yes, sir, Douglas. We'll keep our side rods in the right place if that's all right with you, said Ben. It is for now, said Douglas. Make sure I don't change my mind. You heard, said Donald. And remember, Dougie's the nice one. They were joking, right? One good rule of thumb around here. Never cross a Caledonian. We'll just, be on our way then. Yeah. Sorry, Murdoch. Glad to hear it. The twins behaved much better after that. Each day, Bill, Ben, and Timothy took turns bringing loads of china clay to the harbor. Under the watchful gaze of the Scottish twins, a week passed by without incident. On the morning of the 8th day of the Brendam renovations, Charlie brought a tank of oil to the clay pits for Timothy. Ah, yes, oil. Thank you very much, Charlie. If you could, just hang tight for a moment. Bill and Ben will be leaving for the docks soon, and they'll get these cars out of your way. Can do, said Charlie. Hey, I've got a joke for you. What do you get when you cross a... Not now, Charlie. I have work to do. Soon, Bill backed down on his train. Ugh, I hate these cars, he said. Why's that? Asked Charlie. You're kidding, right? Said Bill. Do you know how old these things are? Just look at them. The word Brendam, spelled with an H. The city hasn't spelled their name that way in decades. And they're so rickety and creaky. I feel like they're just gonna fall apart every time I move. Oh, I suppose you're right, said Charlie. Say, you guys played any good tricks lately? Well, I suppose not, said Ben. I mean, Donald and Douglas have been watching us like hawks, and, man, they're actually kind of intimidating. Oh, they don't mean any real harm, said Charlie. They'll lighten up as soon as you play a good joke on them. Really? Said Bill. They don't really seem like the joking type to me. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that, said Charlie. Duck told me about a stunt they pulled when they were new to the railway. They switched tenders trying to fool the Fat Controller. Can you believe it? Really? Said Ben. They tried to fool the Fat Controller? As a joke? Well, not exactly, said Charlie. Supposedly it was something to do with some missing coach or something like that, but that's not the point. The point is, I think if you pull a really good one on Donald and Douglas, then you'll see they're, well, not quite so mean as you make them out to be. Well, I don't know, said Bill. Oh, come on, said Charlie. It'll be fun. Don't tell me you don't miss it. Playing games, having fun with people. The twins looked at each other. Well, all right, said Ben at last. Fine, said Bill. We'll try playing some kind of joke on them. But if they come after us for it, you better hope they catch us before we get to you. Bill puffed forward and rattled over the points. Then Ben buffered on behind. Then the twins set off, still not entirely confident in their plan. Meanwhile, Duck had just arrived at the harbor. He looked out at the water in the bay, and in an instant his face turned sour. "Ugh, bust my buffers," said Duck. "I thought it was cold last night, but I didn't know the whole darn bay would freeze over." Percy arrived next. "Cinders and ashes," he cried. "This whole place is ice. These boats will never get out of here." "This happens every year," said Oliver. "But this is exactly why we can't have all the island's naval traffic coming through this port. Brendam doesn't have this problem. We do." A workman was out on the ice, testing it. "I don't believe it," he said. "Sturdy, I take it?" said Oliver. "Incredibly," said the workman. "This is more than just a frost on the top. This is some of the thickest ice I've ever seen." Duck cursed under his breath. "Great," he said. "This is just what we need. Man, you could drive a car on this, it's so thick." "So, what do we do now?" asked Percy. "Well," said Oliver, "the ice should be thinner further out to sea. Hopefully incoming ships will be equipped to handle the ice. Perhaps they can break it up as they come in." "Until then," said Duck, "we'll just have to store any incoming cargo from trains by the quay. If necessary, we can use the Knapford goods yard as overflow." "Right," said Percy. "Let's not waste any more time then." So the engines set to work at once. Bill and Ben arrived later than usual that day. The frost had iced up the rails, so they only went as fast as they dared. Bill was so busy trying to think of a prank to pull on the Scottish twins that he didn't notice Douglas coming down the line with some freight cars. A stack of crates obscured his view until Douglas was right in front of him. Bill screeched on his brakes, but Ben kept pushing. There was a splintering crash as the force of the two engines caused one of the old China clay cars to collapse in on itself. Douglas screeched to a halt, inches from Bill's buffers. "What do you think you're doing?" cried Douglas. "This is my line." Oh dear," said Bill. I'm sorry, Douglas. I didn't see you. Behind the crates." "You should have been able to see me fine," said Douglas. "If you'd been paying attention, that is." "Calm down, Douglas," said Percy. "We've got bigger problems. Edward's going to be arriving any minute now, on that line. We need to clear the points." "Look's sake, Percy! Here he comes!" "Oh, what do we do? What do we do?" cried Ben frantically. Suddenly, Bill had an idea. "Switch him onto the siding," he said. "Into the ocean?" exclaimed Douglas. "Have you lost your mind?" "No, Bill's right," cried Ben. "The ice, it might be able to just hold him long enough for one of us to pull him off." "Don't argue, just do it. It's our only chance," said Bill. A workman ran over and switched the points. At that moment, Edward came speeding in. As he did so, he saw the accident. "Brakes! Brakes!" he cried. His brakes came screeching on. Edward came off the track and slid out onto the ice. "Whoa!" he cried. Miraculously, the ice seemed to be holding. But then, cracks began to appear beneath his wheels. "He's gonna fall in!" exclaimed Percy. Just then, Duck returned. He quickly assessed the situation and was soon coupled onto the caboose. "Hold on, Edward!" cried Duck, and he gave a great heave. "Whoa!" cried Edward. "Not so fast! You'll make the ice break!" The engines looked on nervously as Duck continued pulling Edward to safety. More cracks began appearing in the ice. "You know what, Duck?" said Edward. "Forget what I said. Get me off now! Hurry!" Duck heaved his mightiest, pulling Edward to safety seconds before the ice gave way. The engines breathed a huge collective sigh of relief. Edward was safe. Within an hour, the fat controller had been informed of the incident. Edward had re-entered the harbor on another line, and Marion had been called to clear up the china clay. "Gonna dig all day, gonna dig all night. I'll shovel away and I'll make it right. I'm digging, I love digging. I'm digging, I'm digging, I'm digging some more. I'm digging, I'm digging, I'm digging. Oh, hello there, Nelson." "Nelson, have I ever told you About the time I dug up a whole Spanish galleon? Oh, Marion, have you ever met a little green excavator named Alfie? You and he would be a match made in heaven. Are we? Said Marion. I think I'd like to meet this Alfie and see exactly what you mean. Does he like digging? Well, I should say so. He especially likes mud, that one. Mud? Indeed, the man has no taste in soil quality. Mud is so runny. I prefer, personally, I prefer, more of an al dente sort of texture. More of a what? No, speak no more of this Alfie. I shall have nothing to do with him. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do. Digging, I love to dig, but not with mud, mind you. Oh dear. Al dente, what nonsense. Please, sir, said Ben. We didn't mean to cause that accident. I was distracted. I was thinking about, playing jokes, I suppose. Please, sir, I'm sorry. Ah, jokes. In our yard? You wouldn't be thinking of playing them on us, would you? Enough, said the Fat Controller, holding up a hand. Bill, Ben, I am not at all pleased with the accident you have caused. However, the one you prevented with your quick thinking and ingenuity is of far greater importance. Thanks to you, Edward and his important cargo are safe, and you are both, in that respect at least, really useful engines. Don't forget about Duck, said Percy. He's the one who actually pulled Edward off of the ice. Oh, I've not forgotten him, said Sir Topham Hatt. You acted just in the nick of time, Duck. I am very proud of you. Thank you, sir, said Duck. I was only helping a friend in need. Now then, said Sir Topham Hatt, it seems to me that the root of a great deal of this trouble revolving around overcrowded ports is the Earl and his mysterious plans. I will be speaking to Sir Robert Normanby once more about all of this. Speaking of overcrowding, said James, would you all kindly consider having your conflict resolution meeting somewhere else? Oh, right. Sorry, James. Of course. Back to work, everyone. So back to work the engines went. That evening, Bill and Ben were telling Boko about all that had happened. Ah, said Boko, and what have we learned from all of this? Well, said the twins, fun and games are all well and good, but only so far as they, as well as thinking about them, doesn't get in the way of more important things. Exactly, said Boko. I'm glad to see that you two have finally learned something. Yeah, said Ben. Actually, this whole ice affair has given me a great new idea for a trick to play on Timothy. What was that, Ben? Oh, nothing, Timothy. Said Boko. If I were you, Timothy, I'd be extra careful around these two for a while. At least until the spring thaw. Now what on earth is that supposed to mean? The twins only smiled. Maybe they had done admirably that day, or perhaps it was just par for the course. As they backed into their sheds, however, one thing was certain. Whatever the weather, Bill and Ben would always be their old mischievous selves. It's getting ridiculous. This plan of yours is getting out of hand. It's too ambitious. It's causing problems where we least expect them. Look at the ports. It's doing far more harm than it is good, Robert. Surely you see that. Tell me you do. I trust you, Sir Robert, but if your plans are going to continue like this, I would appreciate knowing a little more than the vague information you have given me. You needn't be so concerned, Sir Stephen. I was well aware of the risks when I set out on this crusade. Crusade, indeed. What is it you think you are doing? It's rather simple, actually. I'm going to change the world, but I need your help to do it. Change the world? What do you mean? I'm going to make this railway a beacon of hope, a city on a hill, an example, no, an ideal for the rest of the world to follow. And when I am through, when I see my vision completed, turned into a reality, the world will never be the same again.